Okay, so we will start like usual. I will use the same workflow, which means I will start making the background first, well, the scenario, and then we'll add the details, the effects, and all the rest of the stuff. So first start creating the canvas. I used the original size is 5,000 I think by 3,000 and something. Let me just check it. Yep. But for this video I'll use something smaller because I'm also recording the video, so 2,500 just to speed up my computer a little bit, help it. And this will be our canvas, but you can use other canvas if you want. You can use a vertical canvas, but that's really up to you. So for this tutorial, for this manipulation, the background that I used was pretty simple. I didn't make any weird things. I just got a pack of photos from photobash.com, I think it is. I'm gonna put the link here on the screen. You will have a few other images available if you want to use other ones. This one is really cool, especially if you want to use the other images of the astronaut, and this rock is a potentially good place to place something here. So you can use this image if you want, or even this one. But I will use this one for this tutorial, so I will just open it. Also, I'm gonna give you this one. This one is from pexels.com, but the ground here is not really that cool. What I really like is those rocks over here, but you can combine, like maybe for example this image, the front part of this image, with this one. That's really up to you. I'm gonna put it in the folder there as well if you want to use it, but for my tutorial I will use this one. So I'm going to place my image right over here on full screen, on covering the entire canvas. And let's delete the original background, and let's name this BG for background. Now, the next thing I want to do is add the planet, but before we do that, I wanted to change the sky. Now, my idea was to create this sort of like another planet. I wanted to create sort of like an alien planet sky, sorry. So what I did is I just used the texture. So I used this image. The reason why I used this one is because I have those lines over there, which I could modify to make them like follow the same direction of this clouds over here. So basically what I did first, we'll have to create a layer mask. So select the BG layer, select the quick selection tool, and select the sky really quick like that. And go to this texture and create a layer mask for it. Okay, now we have to unlock this and make the texture a little bigger to fill the entire scene. And what I did next is I will change the blend mode to soft light. You can try others if you want, but I think this one looks nice. It just looks like a nice, well, light there. And I'll right click, press Ctrl Command T, right click and choose distort, and I just wanted to make these lines flow towards the source of the light right over there. So let me just do this again. Actually use warp instead of distort, sorry, and just drag the image like that and just leaving them straight over there. Make sure they cover the entire thing over there. Now this layer mask that we created for the sky is going to be useful in just a second, so make sure you keep it. Okay. The next thing we want to do is add the planet over there. So let's open it. I will open it on another document. You will see you'll have a few different planets. I actually got these images from the NASA website, and they're really high resolution, and I think I used this one actually. I liked how it looked, but if you want to use this one, so like an Earth looking planet, you can do that, and this is Earth if you want to use it. I'll use this one. Just let me open it, and I'll just make a selection like this to select it like so, create a layer mask, and I don't want these edges to be so sharp, so I will refine the mask by right clicking and choosing select and mask. And I will just shift the edge a little bit and increase the feather. You will see it. This will actually soften the edge, which is what I want. And just click OK. And I will now apply the layer mask. Right click and choose apply. and just cut this and put it here on my image and turn it into smart object because it's too big. And I'm gonna name this planet, create something like that. Now we have to integrate this into the sky. There are several ways of doing that. One of the things is let's name this texture, sky texture. It's this image over here. You can try and put it on top. This will make it look like this clouds or whatever it is, it's on top of the planet. And one other thing you can do is on the planet, you can try and use this blend if options over here. So if you double click to go into the layer styles, you'll select the blend options, and here on the bottom you will see two controls. And if you choose the underlaying layer, you can click and move this to the side, and you can see like kind of starts to integrate with the background, and you can do that. You can also use a layer mask and kind of fade away part of the with a linear black to white on the layer mask. You could kind of fade away this part of the planet like that. Also, one other thing you can do is add a color overlay and sample something from the sky, from the real sky over there. And instead of using soft light, maybe try using screen, and then use a darker tone of the color. And this will create the illusion that the planet is further away into the atmosphere, and you can integrate it a little better. Now, I also added layer styles on this planet. So I think I added inner shadow, but if you use the layer mask, using styles will be a problem. So you should not use layer style on this gradient if you want to use layer styles. So I'll use inner shadow, and I'll use the angle about -120 and increase the distance quite a lot, like so, and also the size. And I'll use a bluish tone, something like that. And try screen, usually works great. And this is the effect that you get. It's just sort of like creating an atmosphere of this planet. And then use also drop shadow or outer glow to add some glow of this planet. I'm going to increase the size quite a lot. And here you want to use something blue, but really something really light, not very saturated. Okay, and that's how I created this really quick planet here, which I think looks pretty good. You can also darken it if you want, the top part. Or one other thing you can do, if you still want to use that gradient, which I think looks really great, is you can group this planet by pressing Ctrl-Command-G with the layer selected. This puts it inside of the group. And I named this planet group. And you can create a layer mask, but for the group itself, not for the planet. And now you can try and use this gradient, and that way you don't affect the layer styles of the planet. Okay, so you can fade away part of the planet like that, maybe. Yeah, something like that. Okay, and on the planet you can also add some gradient overlay and use black to white from the basics. And let's see, no, screen is not what I want. I want multiply. Let's see how that looks. And let's reset the alignment so I can see where my gradient is. But yeah, I want to use linear. And for some reason I have to do it again. Okay. Yeah, I want to reverse it, so I'm going to choose reverse and have something like that, just to darken the top part of the planet right over here. Okay, but that's really up to you depending on how you like it. Okay, now we're done with the planet. Let's leave it like that. And the next thing I want to do, I'm going to show you how to create mist here, even though I didn't use it in the end because I added some stuff over there and it didn't look nice. But I want to show you how you can do that. Now we're going to work again with this layer mask over here. So what I did is I just created a new layer on top of everything, and I Control-clicked the layer mask. This will select, but it will select the top part. We want the bottom, so I will invert the selection from select inverse, and now I will use the gradient but I will customize it. I will use black to blue, this blue tone. We'll see if it's, maybe it's too strong, we have to darken it even more, but we'll see. And I will put this layer on screen, and with the selection active, what I will do is drag from here to the bottom. Okay, I have to reverse it and do something like that, and you can see how cool it is. You can create really nice mist effects there. I'm going to press Ctrl Command H just to hide that so you can see how it looks like. Okay, so you can create this sort of cool mist effects, and if you want to go even further, what you can do with this layer is double click and use the underlaying layer and just move this like that. And that way what you will do is you will keep this mist only on part of the image. Let me just show how it is. Looks like without it and with it. And I think it looks great, but only a touch of it. Something like that, to about 30%. Because the sky is really bright and we want some of that light to be visible here on the ground as well. So about 30 or 40%. I think it's enough. Anyways, after you're done doing this, you can change the color if you don't like it. If you want something more yellow, for example, you can press Ctrl Command U. This will open the hue saturation, and you can modify the color of this. Let me just put it at 100% so you can see what I'm actually doing. And if you change the hue, you can see, oops, you can see how it looks like. But I think blue looks really nice, or maybe this pinkish tone looks pretty cool. Create a new layer, and now let's do the same. Control click on the sky texture layer mask. This will select the top part, which is what we need this time. And I will do the same using exactly the same gradient and do something like that, but I forgot to change the blend mode of this to screen. Okay, and yeah, it's too bright. Let me just use something different, something a little more saturated and darker. And do it again. Now your objective here is to make everything kind of seamless in terms of especially in terms of light, and right now it's not looking like that because the ground is really dark and we have a lot of light here. So what I wanted is to darken the sky. So what I did is I went down here on the bottom on the background layer and created a new layer on top, and I will use the same layer mask. So again, control click to select the sky, go back down here to this layer which I just created, and with this selection active, I'll create a curves adjustment, and the curves will use this selection to create the layer mask, and I just want to darken a little bit the sky. I don't want to have too much contrast, so I don't want to have something like that. Instead, I want to darken the whole thing a little bit. You can also change the color of it if you use curves, but right now the ground is not too saturated, so don't overdo it here. Do not change the color too much. Maybe a little more magenta there, and probably a little more. I don't know. Maybe I think I darkened it too much here with on the RGB, so probably let's do something like that and drag the lights a little lower. Okay, we have the background ready. So what I will do is first rename this to Sky Mist and group everything. And I'll name this ground. Maybe I'll have to come back here to add some stuff in here, but for now, this is my background. Real simple. The next thing we want to do is add the astronaut over here, because he will determine the rest, how we will add the rest of the details. So that's what we're going to do next. Let's open our stock folder, and here you'll find several images of this astronaut which I rendered in Blender, and you can use any of them. I rendered like 3 of them standing like on the ground, 1 of them standing like straight. You can make this like you see it from the top down, or however you want to put it, even standing up if you want, but I wanted to have it like standing down. I think well, I liked it better. So I don't remember which one I used, if this one or yeah, actually those ones are really similar. I think I will use this one, the third Astronaut 3, and I'm gonna flip it horizontally and just put it right over here. I will make it a little smaller. There, let me just check my original just so I can see more or less how it looks like. You don't want to have it too small, like for example that small, because, well, you could, but unless you add some other stuff in here, he's gonna lose power, let's call it that way. Okay, so I want him to be the star of the show. That's why I used a pretty big size, and actually I should have rendered him a bigger chunk of his body, but anyways, I'm gonna leave it right over there. And now let's add that ship. You can leave this empty. The planet already has something. It's a good element to balance things, because here we have lots of light, and here we have this big element which is softer, but it's kind of balancing the composition. Don't forget about the composition, because it's important. And in this one, I don't really like the composition that I ended up with, but not looking bad anyways. So I don't know, just post a comment there and suggest something else, or just create something else yourself and just send it via Instagram on my account, #PSDbox, or just mention me, and that way I get a notification so I can see how you made your composition. So I added this ship. I wanted to add maybe some big aliens walking around, but in the end I sticked with this ship, which I also rendered in Blender. Now the size of this ship will determine how far it is. If I put it right over there, you can see it looks like it's a really small ship. It really depends on how you want the composition to be and how much importance you want to give to the ship. I think in my document here, I think it's maybe a little too big. I don't know. Oops, I have to place it again. But just place it according to your own liking. Bigger or smaller. I think I will leave it right over there. Just rotate it a little bit. Place it over there. I have to create a layer mask for it now, because we have to erase this part. And the reason for that is because I want to create the illusion that this is behind this little hill, so I will mask this out. We will deal with the shadows a little later on. Let's make some adjustments to the ship as well. You can see it's pretty dark compared to the rest of the scene, so since I have this as a smart object, I'll use the cursor right on the layer, because they will be converted into smart filters. And I just want to light up the shadow part, and I also want to give it a tone of blue, because the whole scene has this sort of blue tone. So just raise this up a little bit. Now nothing will happen, or very little effect you will get if you move the curve from here, because we have no graph here. The ship is really dark, that's why we have all the graph in here. So you could treat this beginning of the graph like it would be here. So just put a couple of points here to lock the whole thing, and just move this from here. You can do the same with the reds, because if you remove reds, you will add cyan, which will contribute to that blue tone that we want to add for the ship. Let's click OK. Now we also need a little bit of light here on the top, and there are several ways of doing it. You can use a gradient overlay, for example, or you can use inner shadow. Let's try inner shadow, because I think it's easier. And just increase the distance a little bit. Make sure you have the angle of about 105 degrees. Blend mode screen, and this color is too bright, so you can also try soft light, but use a brighter tone, brighter than 50%. And of course we have to increase the size of this to soften it, and yeah, I think it looks great like that. It looks pretty good. Let me just saturate it a little more, and you can also combine it with the gradient overlay if you want to. Black to white, No diamond, I want the linear. Like that. Increase the scale. Blend mode, I will use screen. And drop the opacity quite a lot, to about 7%. It's even less, to about 4%. And that looks a little better now. We still have to create the shadows, but we're good to go with this. Now, these are the main elements here. From now on, we have to add even more details. When I rendered this astronaut, I added a few artificial lights here, because here I wanted to add something that was emitting light, and here as well. So what I did is I added a few gemstones, like this will be some kind of alien stones, or whatever you want to call them, or gems or something like that, and some random alien flowers and bugs here. So let's add this part over here and some of the flowers, because they're easy to add, and then I will show you how I made the effects. So first, let's open that image of these gemstones, and let's cut them and place them right over here. Let's see where the astronaut is. I'm gonna place them there, and I will turn this into smart object. I like to work with smart objects. Okay, and I don't remember, I think I used, yeah, actually, no, actually I will remove, you could use the screen blend mode. It's gonna work, okay? So you can place them over there and it's gonna work. But the reason why I didn't do that is because I wanted to change the color of that, and on the midtones, where we have some grays over here, it's going to look a little nasty. So what I did instead is, I will just make this bigger again so I can see it better. What I will do is just remove the black parts of the image. So I'll select the quick selection tool, or actually you can use the magic wand, but use a tolerance. Let's try a tolerance of 19, and that will do. Okay, and now you can fine-tune this using the quick selection tool if you want to, but I think it's not necessary. Anyways, we're gonna make this a lot smaller, so anyways. And I'm gonna create the layer mask. Okay, and now I'll make this quite small. Put that right over there, and in order to fix this straight line, get your brush, use a hard brush, about 90% or something like that, and paint with black on this layer mask which you just created, and just paint with black, not with white, and just create a random round shape like that. Actually, let's get rid of that. And just create an imaginary line, which is just avoid something really straight, and that's pretty much it. Nobody can tell that it was actually a straight line over there. And here we have to make this like pointy, and that's it. We will fix this later on if we need to, but let's leave that there. And now I'm going to just create a copy of this with Control J or Command J, and I'm going to flip it horizontally and make it smaller, and just rotate it a little bit to just fit inside of this hole, something like that. Yeah, on top of that other one. And I'm gonna just move them around. Now I can see something over there. Just make sure you clean the background. And now we have to, let's name this gems, and I'll turn it into smart object. And now I'll use some curves, or actually first I'm going to use hue saturation and just change the hue. I'll choose colorize and use something like that, and maybe a little more saturated like that. Try to match a little the the hue of this light. And next I'll add some curves with control, or you can use levels as well, but I like curves a lot better. And just increase the contrast of them a little more. And probably on the hue saturation, I will saturate them a little more. So I'm gonna double click again and just saturate them slightly more and click OK. Now we have the stones over there. Of course, we still have to add light effects, shadows, and all of that. But you can see, try and create like a bunch of gemstones over there, and that's it. What else? Let's add some of those plants around here. You'll find a few stock images. This is one of them. I rendered this in Blender as well and just added some lights around there. Let's turn this into a smart object. Put this on top of the astronaut and group it, and I will name it plants 1. This will be the plants that will be on top of the, well, above the astronaut, and just place them right over there. Let's see. You can actually make them a little bigger, fill that in there like that, then duplicate it, flip it horizontally, and use that other side to stick that from there like that. Maybe a little lower. Just randomly place a few plants like I did here. Okay, so what I will do now is just fast forward and add a few of those plants around here, and we will continue when I'm done. Okay, now I've added those plants. You can see I added these ones over here, these blue plants. I made them really small to create a sense of the distance, okay? And I added them on top of this, well, or close to these rock formations here, and I will place them right over there. You can add some, maybe one of them over here, sticking out or something like that. Maybe, I don't know, let me just paste another one just so you can see what I'm talking about. I can add one of them over there, and I have to drag this under the ship. I actually dragged the ship on top of the ground group, just above it, just because I wanted to avoid having some problems with the plants. But you can see it's overlapping with this other plant, so I think it's not necessary to add that many. Probably I would add it really small over there. Me, I don't know. Yeah, I think that could look nice. Or maybe drag this flower somewhere around here. Let me just check my original. Yeah, this one flower is a little smaller. Actually, it's too big. Yeah, so let me just make it smaller. Okay, that looks a lot better now, I think, because that way we can allow our the viewers to actually, let's get rid of this one. We allow the viewer to see on the background there. Okay, so let me just make this one a little bigger, and that way we substitute that plant with this bigger blue plant over here. We'll add a light effect there, and it's going to look just nice. Okay, now this one, I think it's not necessary to have it there, so just add a few things around here, make them look pleasing to the eye, but do not overdo it. Do not add too many, or if you like them, just go ahead and do it. Now we have almost all the elements. I will add a simple bug over here. I have this bugs over here which I rendered, this alien, I think they're called at least from Sketchfab, which is the website where I downloaded this. I will add the links to these models on the video description if you're watching it from YouTube, and also on my website. I think they're called face sucking insects or something like that, and I'll add one of them there, and probably another one, probably another one over there. But this one has to be really small because it's further away from our scene over here. And here you can add something here. I didn't know what to put in here. I wanted to add sort of like a bug or like an insect or flying insect that was glowing, but I didn't know what to do. And I actually added this bug over here, but I changed the color of it, and just like his emitting light. It's not really convincing, but you can try and find something to add there, or maybe another plant or something there that could look interesting. Okay, let's close those images, and we have pretty much everything here. Let me just check it again. Yeah, we have everything in here. Now, one other thing I did add is you can see here on the ground we have this sort of like colorful noise, and I added this. Let me just show you. I used the texture, which is on the resources folder. Let me just minimize these groups, and I'll put this just on top of the background. Create a new layer and open my texture. I think it's this one over here. I just copied. You can copy parts of it. Let me just group this and name this color noise, and just add this texture over here. And you can use either the screen or the lighten, but I think the lighten blend mode looks better. And just create a layer mask and mask out this. Let me just decrease the hardness and just randomly paint out some of that. You can also use curves or levels to get rid of most of that darkness or the midtones and just leave the brightest dots in there. And oops, I painted on the image, not on the layer mask. And the same here. I'm going to add just another one right there. I will make it smaller. And I'll create an inverted layer mask, and I'll just paint in with white some of those colorful noise textures. I think it looked cool, that's why I added them, but it's really up to you if you want to add them or not. Okay, now we're done. Let's move on, and the next step is creating the shadows, and then we'll create the light effects and then the final effects, and we're done. Creating the shadows for this manipulation is not really complicated because we don't have too many to create. But before we do that, I forgot to make some adjustments to the astronaut because it's kind of dark. So I'll use some curves to just bring some light on the suit, and click OK. I think that looks better. And actually, let me just also give him some color. Add some cyan and also some blue. Okay, I think it looks better now, right? Before and after, what do you think? I think it looks better. Now, let's start with the shadows. Let's go on the ground below the color noise, just on top of the ground group. Create a new layer, and let's name this ground shadows. And I'll start with the astronaut. I will drop the opacity to 50 and the flow to 30, and just activate transfer because I have my graphics tablet, but you can do it with a mouse as well. And just create some shadows here. Oops, let me see my hardness. Actually, let me try and see how this looks like if I drag it on top of the color noise. I think it's going to look better. Also, the gems, even though they emit light, they also cast some shadow. You will see that it looks better if you create the shadows for them as well. Let's do also for the plant. Really soft shadows. You don't have to go overboard with this. Really soft shadows. Don't go overboard with this. Here we have to add a little more. And of course you could also add for this ones, but here it's not necessary, so I'm not going to add any shadows there, and just add some shadows for this strange alien insects or bugs or whatever they are. And the same for this one. Really soft shadows. And the same for the ship. I'm going to fast forward here for the ship. And on the ship itself, I will add some shadows over here. So locate the ship, create a new layer as a clipping mask, and I will name this ship shadows. And just make some shadows on the bottom part there. And on this side, which is opposite to the light, on some parts I want to have something more darker. And let me go back to the ground shadows because I want to add some shadows right over there as well. Now, of course, this part here emits light, and you could add some light here on the ground if you want to. We will try to do that later on, well, actually on the next step when we create the light effects. But for now, I think we're good to go with this. So that's really quick. That's all the shadows that I created for this. I could make some shadows for the astronaut, so I'll create a new layer, name it Astronaut Shadows, and just paint over his body, especially here on the bottom part, and maybe a little bit over there, and on this part of the arm. Okay, so we're done with the shadows. I forgot to create a layer mask for this plant. Let me just do that really quick because I think it's not looking that realistic. And let me use a harder brush. There's a motorbike there on the background. Let me just increase the brush opacity. Yeah, I think that looks a little better. Just make it look like it's growing from behind that rock. And on this bugs, of course, you could change the colors. You could change the hue to make them bluish, but you'll have to deal with the eyes. If it, for example, I wanted to add this cyan tone to them. Let me just see if I can do it. With color eyes, I could do it easier. Okay, so you could create something like that, but keep in mind that the eyes will also change. So if you're okay with that, let's leave this to 0 actually. Well, actually to 50. If you're okay with that, do it. If you're not, you can create a layer, an adjustment layer. Hue saturation, clipped to the object itself, to that bug. Create the effect. Maybe not that saturated, something like that. And now with the layer mask, you can get rid of the effect and just keep the eyes red if that's what you want. Okay, we're done. Let's move on and create the light effects. As usual, when we create the light effects, we will use primarily two blend modes, screen and color dodge. And the screen, we will use it to create glows, and the color dodge, we will use it to cast lights on objects like the ground or the flowers or the body or the ship or whatever. So let's start with creating the glows. And let me just minimize these things over here. And I'll put this on top of everything. New layer. I'll just name it glows and change the blend mode to screen. Now the glows that I will create are for this plants and these weird flowers. So I'll get the brush tool, use a soft brush, use opacity and flow 100%, and I will deactivate the transfer because I don't need it for this. And the reason why I do it, if you want to control the amount of effect that you add with this blend mode, it's better to use darker tones. So the brighter the tone, the more effect you will get. Let me just demonstrate that. So if I, let me just select, actually just sample a color from there. If I just click like that, you can see it's way too strong. So in order to get a better effect, you don't just use a lower opacity on the brush, for example, like that. You could, but it's not really exactly the same effect. Or just dropping the opacity. Instead, just drop the lightness of that tone and just click again. Let me just change the blend mode again to screen. So just use a darker tone until you find the tone that, well, the amount of effect that you want. It's a lot better than just dropping the opacity on the brush. So let's do the same here. Here we're gonna get something like that. Here for this one, you can create something a little stronger, because this blue is kind of dull and it's very like switched off. So just you can use a stronger effect there if you want to. And let's do the same here. Also, it really depends on how the background it is. For example, let me just show you. If I just paint with this blue, you can see this blue over here. If I paint that here, it's going to be visible like that. But if I paint it here, you can see it's a lot stronger. So it depends. If the background is really dark, the effect will be a lot more visible than if the background is brighter. So keep that in mind as well. Let me just sample that color from there as well. Use a darker tone and do something like that. See, here it's too strong, so I'll have to use something almost dark, almost black. Okay, and the same here. Let's just add a few glows. Oh, that's too big and too bright. Actually, no, let's leave it like that. I think it looks great. And there as well, and maybe some yellow to add some glows here. I think those could look nice as well. And some blue for this area over here. Yeah, I think that looks great. Now let's deal with these. Here we could use some orange, but really dark. You can see it's almost black. The reason for that is because you can also use layer styles for this gems. Let me just locate the layer, and you can use outer drop shadow or you can use outer glow. It really doesn't matter. Let's just use outer glow and do something like that. The blend mode, the screen blend mode is okay, but we want to have something like that. And what else? Yeah, actually, I don't know if I would add this outer glow. I don't think it's necessary. Yeah, I forgot to paint. Yeah, I should have painted more shadow underneath this gems, so I will probably do that. On the glows, I will add more glow, but using something a little brighter than I did before. And let me again deactivate the transfer option. Okay, and do it again. Yeah, that looks better, I think. And I forgot to add some glows over there. Oh, that's too big. That's too strong. That and that. Something a little brighter in the middle. Okay. And next, before we go to the, or actually let's use the color dodge, because the next one is the color dodge. Create a new layer on top of the glows and name it dodge lights. And here, change the blend mode of this to color dodge. And here I want to create some lights that, for example, these gems cast on the ground, and also these weird plants cast on the ground as well. So I will fast forward, but I'm just going to explain how I will do this. I will change the opacity of the brush to about 60 and the flow to about 40. and that way I can build up the effect. And I will use a color which is stronger than I need. So if I would use this color at 100%, look what will happen. It's going to be really strong, and on top of that, the tone is not right. It's too red. Okay, maybe I would use this one, but it's too strong. So what I will do is just drop the opacity to 60 and the flow 40, and I will activate my transfer option. And now I can safely just paint and build up the effect however I want on any place where I want. That's why I use these settings. So I use the color stronger that I need, so I can build up the effect gradually using this opacity and flow and the transfer option. So that's what I'm going to do now. We'll paint the shadow, well, the lights that this gems cast on the ground. This is something that you will need a little more practice with, and it's not necessary. If you don't do it, you can create like a big, let me just show you, you can create like a big light like so, and you will be good to go. But you can be a little more selective and paint on the highlights a little more, which is what I will try to do now. And then I will move on with those blue plants over there. Okay, for this blue plants, we will do pretty much the same thing, but changing the tone of the brush. I'll use something like this, use a small brush, and just start painting over here, like so. And that's how it looks like when you look it from a bit further away into the distance. As I said, you can do the same here. You can sample some colors from here, for example this one, and here on the ground you could paint some of those rocks, all those stones that you have there, but just a few ones. Just painting with a soft brush, I don't think it's going to look nice. So instead, just paint a few of those rocks over there. You can see it's not much, but it definitely create a nice effect, I think. You will see that it's going to look better from the distance when I zoom out. I will show that in just a few seconds. So see that? Okay, and probably here I would paint this a little more. And here I would have to move more a bit towards orange. I don't know, that one doesn't look really that good, so I'm gonna delete it. I don't think it's looking nice. And here on this blue plants, you can also paint on themselves as well. So let me just show you that. I would probably go more towards green. On this same dodge lights layer, you could make a glow in the center of them, like that, to give them a little more shape. Make them stand out a little better. And the same here, you could sample some colors from there and just light up some of these plants around here. Just sample the tones and paint over, and that's it. And the same here with this gems, like that. And the same here, just make that light stand out a little more. And the same around here. Just light things up, as you can see. Let me just group everything so you can see how it looks like without the glows and the lights, and with the lights. Everything stands out a little better. And here on the glows, actually, I will use a big soft brush for the ship, and just sample a dark tone, and see. Yeah, I think that looks better. and here as well. I'll sample this reddish tone. Oh, that's too much. And that's pretty much it. Okay, again, without the lights and with the lights. And what I want to show you next is how I added this glowing effects here. It's really simple and it's really easy. It's really fun as well. But before I do that, I forgot to add this broken glass effect here, which is again really simple. Just open the stock image of this broken glass. I got this from depositphotos.com, my trusted stock photo sites. And let's name this lights. That's the group on the top. And let's locate the astronaut. And I'm gonna add this between this and the astronaut shadows, and I'm gonna name this shattered glass. And of course we want to make it smaller. I'm gonna flip it horizontally maybe. And I'm gonna change the blend mode to screen. You can use lighten as well. I think screen is going to look better. Let me just check really quick. Yeah, screen. I think screen looks better. Just it's really up to you. Just decide which one you like better. And in order to make it look more realistic, you have to imagine that this is rounded. This is actually like a ball, so you'll have to modify this texture. So press Control Command T to load the free transform, right click and choose warp, and from here just try to imagine how you would warp this to a rounded surface. Okay, something like that. Okay, this will distort it and make it look like it's actually wrapped around this round surface. Don't distort it too much because it's going to lose quality, but get something like this. And now create a layer mask for it. Get the brush tool. Let me deactivate transfer, and let me just zoom in a little more and just remove the effect and just leave it where the glass should be. Okay, and we're good to go. We have the hole in the helmet, and we're actually good to go. Let's go back to the lights group and here create a new layer. And actually here we have to create several layers, one for each of the colors. So we have pink, blue, and green. Pink, blue, green, and yeah, and some yellow here. So let's create this for the pink. Let's name this pink. Actually, you will see that we will create a layer style which we will duplicate and just change colors. So on the pink layer, go into the brush. Well, first select your brush. Make sure you have a hard brush, normal round hard brush, and then go into the brush settings. You can do this from the panel. If you don't have it here, go to Window and choose brush settings or press F5. And from here, we will activate scattering. First, drop the size to about between 7 and 10, I would say. Depends on also on your canvas size. Activate scattering, increase the scatter quite a lot, well actually to the maximum. Leave the count to 1 and activate the dual brush. And from here, select any brush here that has some irregular shapes. I think I used this one, or I actually use any kind of brush that you have that has some irregular shapes, like for example that one. And here with the settings on the bottom, just play, actually let me just deactivate the scattering because you will see it better, and just increase the size, the spacing. Increase the spacing until you see these dots, and also increase the size a little bit. Now go back to the dual brush, and here select any of the brushes there. You can also change the blend mode. I think I used color burn, but you can use multiply. I think it's going to look better. The objective here is to get irregular shapes like this, and you can change how it looks like using the size and the spacing, okay, of this brush. So the objective is to get something that is not round, but you also have some close to roundness, something like this, okay. On the brush tip shape, on the shape dynamics, you can also change the roundness jitter, and this will create something like that. And now go back to the brush tip shape and decrease the size. You will see that this will start to change. So I think you can also make tests here on your canvas. Actually, we will paint with white. Okay, so just make a few tests to see the size. I think 5 or 6 will be okay for my canvas size. And go back to the scattering and activate it. Both axes is not necessary to activate it. Count, you don't have to activate that either. I think that's good enough. Try other options. For example, dry edges, I think could, wet edges, sorry, could contribute to create some different effects. Or just use round, just use a round brush. But I think it's looking better if you just have some irregularities on the edges. I will leave it like that because I don't want to spend more time on this. And now I will just create a few lines, like, well, a few points like this. You can also, of course, use different sizes. Just modify the size of the brush as you go. And what I will do is just add a few, let me try here first. Create a few points like this and go inside of the layer styles of this pink layer. Here I will add drop shadow, or you can use outer glow. I have outer glow, and use the same color that you use for that plant, something like this. And I will use screen instead of color dodge for the effect. And here the size is kind of too big, I think. And here you just have to play with the range. So you can see the higher the range, the softer the transition. You want to have the range somewhere between 20 and 50. And then, well, of course, it depends on the size. If you have a really big size, you'll need a low range. You'll get something like this, but that's too much. We want to have individual glows there. So something like that, and decrease the size. Something like that. These points are too big, so I'll have to use a smaller brush. But anyways, I have the effect there. Now I'll just make the brush smaller and make a few points around here. I think I will have to increase the spacing. I don't like they're too close together, so I will just increase the spacing here. I'll delete this and do it again with a smaller brush. So there we have that, also from here. Now if it's too white on the center, what you can do is add a color overlay and use a color similar to the one that you painted, in this case pink. And I think the normal blend mode will work better. Okay, see that? But really subtle. You don't want to go like this because you will get rid of the glow effect. So something like that, just a touch. And let's do the same here. A few points like that. Use different brush sizes. And you don't want to have too many, but you want to have them spread out across that part of the flower. And let's do the same here, but here we have to use a smaller brush. Okay, now let's do the same with the blues. I will create a new layer. I will name it blue, and I will just copy this effect to the blue, from the pink to the blue. The way you do that is pressing and holding the Option key or Alt on Windows, click on the effects and drag it on top of the blue. Here you have to go inside the layer styles on the outer glow especially and change the color to the blue. We'll see if that one will work. And on the color overlay again, we will change this to a subtle cyan. And with the same brush, just paint a few glows of light. Maybe that's too big. Let me just use about 6. Just randomly paint a few glows like that wherever you have blue tones. Okay, there we have it. And now let's go with these trees over here, or well, this weird things. Here we have to use a really small brush. Maybe here you will have to use a copy of the blue layer, because here we have to use a really small brush, and let me just delete that. We have to use a really small brush, and we need different settings for the glow. So I'll just copy, well, duplicate it with Control J and modify the layer style. I will use a smaller radius and a smaller size, because here we have to use a really small brush and the glow will not be visible otherwise. So make just a few ones for testing. Go back in here, go into the glows, and just see what I need for this. Size 4 and range 5 maybe, or 6. Size, maybe it's even too big, too small, sorry. And no, I'll increase the range to 7 and the size to 6. Okay, that'll work. And just draw a few points. Oops. Make sure they're not too close together. Okay, and we're done with the effects. We'll have to create yet another one called yellow for this part over here. And I'm just going to create, well, duplicate the effect. Go into the outer glow. Here I'm going to use a bigger range, and I'll use this tone. Let's see if we'll see if that works. Here we'll use this bright yellow, and let's see, the bigger brush. Yeah, it works. Just create a few glows around here. Again, make sure they're not too close together. I painted kind of too much already, but anyways. The next thing we want to do is create the final effect. So we're done with this. Now I'm going to add the final color tones and the final adjustments. So creating the final effect is really a fun job, and there's no good or bad way of doing it. If you know me, you know I like to use a lot color lookups, but you can use gradient maps, color balance is really whatever you like. So I'll use color lookups just because I like them, and the reason why I like this is because just like trying different color tones and different color combinations with just using a different preset. Now these presets are created by myself, and you can download them from the website, from the premium site, well, from the premium section. I'll include a link on the website and also on the video description if you're watching this from YouTube. Actually, if you're watching this from YouTube, I'll give you the link to download these packs if you're a premium member on my channel. And from here, just select any adjustment you like, any preset, play with the opacities and get any tone you like. I think I used for this one a preset that already comes with Photoshop, which is the Crisp Winter, because I liked this cold tone. And you can use the color blend mode instead of using normal if you just want to keep the color and not change the contrast. But I'll use normal and just drop the opacity to just get a colder tone. And what else? Probably I'll use a color balance just to change a little bit the midtones. And on the highlights, I would like to add a little more yellow and green and get something like that. I'm burning the highlights there. I think it's from the color lookup. Yeah. I'll change the blend mode to color instead and see how that looks like, because it's burning those highlights too much. Okay, I'm not gonna add too many adjustments here because I think it looks great already. So I'll just create a new layer, press Shift Option Command E on Mac, or Shift Control Alt and E on Windows, and turn this into Smart Object, and just go straight into Camera Raw. My objective for this manipulation was to have all of this colorful stuff, maybe even too colorful and magical looking thing. This is what I envisioned for this even before I started. That's why I wanted to create it like this. But if you don't like this, just add less colors. Maybe the temperature here, I'll add more blue, and maybe a little more. Well, it's really up to you. I like more green maybe. I want to have a gradient here for the top part because I don't really like how that sky, I think it looks like, I think it's too bright, so I'm just gonna drop down a little bit the exposure and the highlights especially, because I want to recover some of the details on the planet there. And let's move on. What else? Maybe clarity, add a little bit of clarity, and the dehaze, let's not touch it too much. They also include a new thing called texture in the newer versions of Camera Raw, and vibrance and saturation, I'm not gonna touch them because it's already very saturated. And what else? Let's go into the details and increase the sharpening a little bit in the details. And split toning, let's see what we can do here. You can see how cool color combinations you can create just by it looks great. I think any of these color combinations look great, so it's really up to you what you create. On the calibration, again, you can change each color, each channel separately, so you can really go overboard and create all sorts of crazy tones and saturate each tone separately. I will leave it like that. Probably on the effects I will add some vignetting and spare the highlights by increasing that highlight slider. That will protect the highlights, so it's not going to darken them that much. And about there. And also I think I'll add some grain. Let me just zoom in at 100% so I can see what I'm doing. I like to add grain lately on my manipulations. I think it looks great. And roughness, just a little more, and probably a little more grain. Let me just, oh, that's too much. Roughness and size. No, that's too much. Yeah, there. I'll click OK. Okay, and that's my finished manipulation. Let me show you the before and after. Before Camera Raw and after. We recovered some highlights there on the planet, and just increase the overall contrast and stuff. One other thing you can do, I forgot to do it here on Camera Raw, is you can use filters. For example, let's try it here. You can, here the dominant color is yellow, so I can create the gradient like that, and just you can change the tones with this. As I said, this is new in the newer versions of Camera Raw, but for example, you can add more yellow there, for example, and get something like that. And I could decrease the dehaze and create this sort of mist around there, which is pretty cool, I think. And increase the saturation slightly and click OK. See that? I don't know if you like it, but I do. So that's all. That's how I created this manipulation. Again, let me show you how it all looks without the adjustments and with the lights. So we went from this to this. So you can really spice up your manipulation using light effects on this kind of manipulations. Also, you can create more depth of field. For example, you could have created one of these plants here with the glow out of focus and maybe some particles. Besides these ones that I just created, some black particles flying around here, or not smoke, but a few particles. I think that will also make it look great. But anyways, that's how I created this manipulation. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have different ideas for this, if you use other backgrounds and create other concepts, just use the hashtag PSDBox on Instagram, or just tag me using the PSDBox _ official on Instagram, and that way I'll get a notification. It's better than using the hashtag, because the hashtags you don't get any notification. So thanks for watching, and I hope to join me on my next tutorial.